Welcome to Unlikely Intersections, the podcast where intent, impact, and inquiry inspire our conversations. I'm Dr. Philip Brown with my good friend Dr. Terry Jackson, and you're at the intersection. Interesting thing about intersections is that we all go through many intersections daily. The way we navigate these determines the trajectory of our days and of our lives. Terry, we got a really interesting episode today. We're going to talk about who am I to think?
Who am I to think? You know, that's real interesting. I can ask myself that question from two perspectives. Who am I to think from a kind of negative perspective and saying that I'm submitting to all these limitations that I think that I have? Or I can say, who am I to think? And it causes me to challenge the system such that I perform greater than maybe I've ever performed before, because I'm trying to prove the system wrong, right? So it's great to consider, who do I think I am?
Yeah, who am I? The ultimate question, right? Do
That's
I
right.
exist?
That's right.
Thing.
That's right.
And it's interesting when I contemplate this thing of who am I to think. The first thing I think is, all right, let's look at some perspective, not of me personally. Let's look at humankind. So, Big Bang Theory, 13.8 billion years ago, boom, something happened. We started to get the universe.
Right.
In the Bible, that's when creation began, right? But Earth itself is pretty young. It's only 4.5 billion years old, right? So 4.5 billion years old. But of that, humans as we know them are only 200,000 years old.
That's right.
We've only had civilization for 6,000 years. And the industrial age began less than 200 years ago.
That's right.
So as we contemplate our relative scope in the grand scheme of things, we're just a little balls of energy on this planet that's been here for billions of years, and unless we win the genetic lottery, we get about 90 years and we're out.
That's right. Even less than that when you start looking at the actuarial tables, right? So what real impact can we have? Who am I to think that I can really have the impact? Well, we can look at examples. We can look at Dr. King. We can look at Gandhi from a positive perspective. Right? We can take a look at what we are calling all of this, these environmental issues that we face with global warming. But that's still a very small and minute amount of time, given how old this planet is.
One of the things that strikes me about it is kind of puts in perspective the value of worrying about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, should I listen to the mental chatter in my head that's a constant source of fear and worry and quest for control of things that
we have no control over?
It's almost comical, right? And it's way different than helplessness, right? We're not talking about helplessness at all. What we're really talking about is the concept of acceptance,
yes.
Right? Is that, to think that any one of us can create a world according to us and it have any scale whatsoever is profoundly egocentric, right? It's just not the way it works, right? There are 7 billion humans on an Earth that's 4.5 billion years old, and none of us are going to make it very long, right? We're ashes to ashes and dust to dust.
That's right. That's it.
So we're not going to create this perfect set of surroundings for ourselves that make it so we're always comfortable and things are exactly as we want them to be. But we are profoundly capable of accepting things as they are and being happy within that. and working from that point.
Acceptance is probably one of the greatest skills that we can learn, right? When I lived in Columbus, Ohio for 5 years, that's when I really learned acceptance. Go to work, come home. Basically, I was in Columbus by myself. And so the only people I really knew were those who I worked with. And it allowed me a lot of time to think, reflect, to write, and a lot of quiet time when I chose not to have the television on. So I came to accept a lot of things around just life, who I was, what my capabilities were, just to realize I'm just a human being. I'm just this small. I'm not even sure if I'm relevant on this earth, but for whatever reason, I'm here, right? And in understanding that it gave me so much more understanding of life, so much more joy about life, understanding that there is an expiration date, right? So with that expiration date, I might as well live to the fullest, given an expiration date that I never know when that expiration date is going to happen.
Yeah, nobody knows the time or place.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's
and
right.
it's I'd sort of say it's a lifting of a burden to understand our relative unimportance. Now that doesn't mean we can't do great things in the environments in which we're placed, but our chances of doing great things are enhanced so much when we can just accept things as they are in the moment, right? And not make a condition, not say, I would be happy if only, instead of raining right now, maybe it could just rain 2 days from now because I know I'm not going to need to be outside or whatever. When you think about how that is, you're like, yeah, I can see that. That's a pretty obvious example. But there are less obvious examples that we take with us every day. I would be happy if I wasn't stuck in traffic. I would feel better if it was not quite so hot.
Yeah. It's amazing that you use that as an example with the weather, because part of what I learned, of course, moving from North Carolina to Columbus, Ohio, wasn't accustomed to all of the snow and the cold weather that they have there. And I came to the conclusion that the weather is the weather is the weather. So if there's something that I want to do, somewhere I want to go, regardless of what the weather is, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm actually at the point where I really don't check the weather a great deal anymore to see, well, let me check the weather to see what, no, I'm going to wear what I'm going to wear, and I'm going to go and do what I'm going to do. Oh, it's raining outside. It's pouring down. So what? The weather is the weather. It's been occurring for as long as the earth has been here, and it's going to continue to occur after I'm gone. So while I'm here, whether it's raining, it's sleeting, it's snowing, if there's somewhere I want to go and something I want to do, I'm going to do it. And if something happens, something happens, right? But I can't control that. What I can control is what I'm getting ready to go do, because it's pouring down rain outside, and because maybe you're afraid and you don't want to go. I don't have those fears, because I know I can't control the weather. I'm going to go and do what I want to do when I want to do, if I want to do it, and if something happens, so be it. I'll give you a prime example. I think I used this early on. I was down in the Bahamas, and we were getting ready to go out on the boat. We were going out to this coral reef. And I was like, man, I hadn't been swimming in a long time. We're going out in the ocean, but I want to see the coral reef. I'm going to go see the coral reef. I may not come back, but I'm going to see the coral reef. And I'm sitting here today, and I saw that coral reef. So regardless of what the dangers may have been, I put the dangers aside because I wanted to see the beauty of the coral reef. And I saw it, and I'm still here.
Yeah, that's such a great example. I'll tell you a story from my past, weather related, since we're on weather. I'd gone to take a course in Newark, New Jersey, of all places, right? And it got time to fly back home, and severe thunderstorms all across the east. No way to get a flight. All flights were grounded. Airport was crazy, you know, and start checking into, well, when's it going to be that we can maybe get a flight, you know, maybe 2 days, you know, in Newark, New Jersey. And so just the acceptance of that fact, right? Like, you ain't getting on this plane, not today, probably not tomorrow,
That's
maybe
right.
the next day,
That's
if
right.
you're lucky.
That's right.
It opened up a space, and realizing that that was not possible anymore, not in the way I would want it to happen. It just turned out that there were 2 other people there trying to get back to North Carolina, Raleigh area, where we'd flown out of. And we just said, well, hey, you want to band together? And we rented a car and drove back from Newark, New Jersey. You know, got back home a little later than planned, but we got back where we were going to go.
That's right.
In spite of the weather. And it just, you know, just didn't. It was just, it was one of the times in my life where the plan was a total disaster. But by just staying open to things, the outcome was basically what it was going to be anyway.
That's right.
Maybe a little better because I met a couple
That's
of
right.
pretty cool people.
You accepted what the conditions were, and you ask yourself the question, so how can we still make this work? How can I still get home? It's going to be much later, but how can we do it? You met some great people at the same time. You got home and you know, on a long drive, but so what?
And got a story to tell 20-some years later.
That's right.
It's like-
That's right. That's right. That's
So
right. That's right.
It was pretty fascinating, you know, but we end up so many times with this conditional happiness, right? And it almost always comes back to some act of thinking that things should be a certain way. That's way outside of our control. You know, it's like, well, you know, I had wanted to spend the day outside today, you know, just relaxing. It's a beautiful summer day. We'll say it's, you know, early September, but there's a hurricane coming, right? So you got to change. You know, there's some things you probably need to do outside, which have nothing to do with relaxing. You know, I live near the water, so there's certain things we're going to sort of batten everything down, right? We're going to take things off the porch. We're going to do all these things. And when I look back on the number of times that's happened, while there's always a little bit of anxiety about the storm, we know it's uncontrollable. And actually engaging in the process of battening down the hatches has created some pretty fun memories just with family who was getting ready for this impending storm. So, you know, you can make it how you want, but if you think that you can control a lot of the external factors, ain't gonna happen. You're gonna be disappointed every time.
I used to like to get out and ride around in the hurricanes just to see what was really happening, to see I'm going to call it the fury of Mother Nature, right? And to see the power of, you know, Mother Nature, you know, right before they would close off the beaches, I would ride down to the beach just to take a look at the water and see how it was, we call it violent, but see how it was crashing over and what was actually happening with it. Because I know I couldn't do anything about it, but I accepted the fact that this is what this is. Let me go enjoy this whole feel of what this thing is going to be. Because again, it's been happening as long as the world has been here. And there's nothing that we can do about it. Not that it's anything enjoyable, because it does what we call damage. What I call it is, oftentimes with bad weather, I say that Mother Nature is correcting what man has done. Because we've cut down all these trees and we've done all these different things, and we expect that these animals are going to just find somewhere to go. And so it's like, I think it was it Porter's Neck in Wilmington just yesterday, where a black bear walked up to somebody's front door, and they wondering why. Well, you've gotten rid of, you know, all of what the bear was accustomed to. You know, it's surrounding, its home. And, So now it's showing up at your front door.
Yeah. So who are we to think that
That's
that
right.
piece of ground is really ours?
That's
We
right.
got all these ownership things and everything, which are, they're constructs that
Mm-hmm.
we've put in. There's reasons in our limited scheme of things why those things are, but there are outside factors that transcend what we think it ought to be like.
Yeah. And, who are we to think that, and again, you mentioned property. Who are we to think that we own property? If you really think you own your property, if you pay it outright, don't pay your taxes and see what happens.
Right. That's right. That's
Don't
right.
pay your taxes
Yeah.
and see what happens, right? Even though you've paid off the mortgage, you still got to pay the taxes. Because if you don't, guess what's going to happen? So, sometimes we as human beings think that we are more important than we actually are. And we are just cogs in the wheel of nature. That is it.
It really is it, and mighty small gears at that.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
Like,
yes.
it's a short time horizon, very small in the grand scheme of things.
And not powerful, right? Because we go out in the woods and we get entangled with a bear. That's a loss. There's not much in nature that man can tangle with just with bare hands and win. So that's why we had to, because I guess our ability to think, our ability to create, the creation of weapons to be able to protect ourselves. So not only we have maybe we have brain power that we tell ourselves that we're the most intelligent being. At least that's what we tell ourselves. We really don't know, but we tell ourselves that our ability to reason, right? But from a power perspective, we're probably one of the least powerful beings on this earth.
What if the whole ability to think is a double-edged sword? I mean, you can make a pretty strong
Yes,
argument, right?
yes.
We twist ourselves in knots based on what we're thinking, and at the end of the day, it's not all that important.
It's not. Let's think about the first tsunami that we really saw happen, and we heard the stories of how the animals went up into the high hills, but the humans were down on the beach and they were enjoying life and enjoying the water and not knowing what was coming. Then all of a sudden, 200 or 300 of them get just washed away and drowned, and because we were so removed from nature, we couldn't feel or see the signs of what was happening. But the animals, it's just like when I lived in California. I get up one morning and the house is swaying back and forth. I'm like, what's going on? Oh, that's an earthquake. That's what that is. And I've been wanting to feel one. But I paid attention and there's no birds chirping, no dogs barking. The wind wasn't even blowing. And I'm like, it was, everything was still, right? And I was like, wow. So in nature informed everyone, probably informed me too, but I didn't pay attention because I'm this human being. I'm highly intelligent. I know what's going on. I'm getting ready to go out into the workforce and work. But nature told everything and everyone what was going on. But I was so removed from nature that I didn't know what was going to happen until I felt this way.
And that's such an amazing example. Think about how that is. We have developed so many systems through our thought processes that in many cases we fail to understand how fragile we actually are. Even with food supply, we're incredibly vulnerable. Just think about people in cities.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has to be brought there somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has to be brought there. The electricity requirements to do common things make us vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
What would we do? And to me, it's just another example of the bigger picture of how small we are. And so it really doesn't make, when you spend some time thinking through that, and you try to get an idea of how much sense does it make for me to worry about controlling my environment to such a degree that I'm not even going to be satisfied or happy unless all these conditions are met. You're just wasting the time of a very short life. It's like you can be happy, like Abraham Lincoln is the person to whom this quote is attributed. But his quote is that I've always found most people to be as happy as they make up their mind to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's within all of our wherewithal to carry with us at all times. But it requires the acceptance piece.
That's so powerful. Acceptance is so powerful. And just because you accept something doesn't necessarily mean, or you accept the way a person is, doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with it, or you just know what it is. Acceptance is, okay, I accept it for what it actually is. Now let's move on, whether it's, one way or the other. I hate to say negative or positive, but I just accept it, and now I can move. Because what prevents a lot of people from being able to move forward is the lack of acceptance, because they get caught up in the stasis of paralysis. What if, and they sit there and they're intellectualizing everything. And oftentimes it doesn't take the intellectualization of it, it takes the instinct, right? We forget that we are animals, and we do have instinct, and we have to sometimes just follow that instinct. If you want to call it your gut instinct, your intuition, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes we need to stop the intellectualization of something and just move with instinct.
Yeah, the business context comes to mind in the sense of who am I or any of the other people in whatever group it is to think that all these plans ought to be made according to the way I think they should.
Right.
Right. It's like
right.
That's just one piece of the puzzle, right? Who am I to think that? Now, that doesn't mean that what I'm thinking doesn't have a place in the ultimate solution or in the plan going forward or in the next step. But it does mean it's that reciprocal obligation that we've talked about before, is that if we're doing something together, whether it's this podcast, whether it's any endeavor, we each have a reciprocal obligation to each other to acknowledge the existence of a different set of circumstances, a different personal reality.
Yes.
And when you get to that point, it takes you to a whole nother plane of behavior. It also takes you to a whole nother emotional domain. You're just in a much better place all the time because you realize, I don't know how many times I catch myself just laughing at my own self.
Yeah.
Because, I've managed to go down the rabbit hole of how I think things ought to be, and they're not that way, and I feel this, you can feel this weird emotional state. You might not can even describe it, but you're just like, man, this is not the right, this is the wrong, this whole thing is off. What is the deal? And then all of a sudden it hits you that I've put all these conditions of how things have to be, and it's got me in this weird place, and I can just let all that go. I can just let it go, and all of a sudden, I'm okay. And I can then look at what I'm really experiencing and move forward from there.
I did that to myself last week on a couple of things. And, it was a daily kind of thing. And I'm looking at some things and I'm like, well, this is not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like this. And then over the weekend, it was like, I was free. None of this was what I thought it was, right? And so the mental chatter, the conditions, and I'm like, how did I get there? And so once I let it all go, I was, free to just to be me, and it's interesting.
Yeah, it's like a fish biting a hook, right? Like our mental models, our mental chatter is sort of is like this baited hook, and there's this strong human tendency to say, that bait, that's the right bait. I'm gonna just bite that.
Right.
And when you do that, when you become that mental chatter, when you are stuck in that model, you're just like a fish that's bitten the hook. Because until something happens and you realize that, this was a lure.
Mm-hmm.
I have fallen for the song of the siren, if
Mm-hmm.
you will.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're stuck, and you can spiral down a long, long way
Yeah.
if you're not careful.
Yeah. When you said, you fell for the lure, I go back. I think it was Beverly Hills Cop when Eddie Murphy said, "Don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe."
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
don't fall for that. It's who am I to think now from an impact perspective? We can look at different people who've had an impact on the world, and their impact. I don't think their impact came from acceptance. They accepted a set of conditions, and they acted in such a way that was small at the time, but it turned out to be extremely huge because there was no ego involved. It was all about what we talk about, the greater good, right? And it was being the example of it what they were trying to achieve. And that's what made it so impactful, because you saw an example of what it looked like or what we thought it looked like. And so there are those times where just a simple, everyday, normal human being can have that great impact by asking the question, who am I? And because the answer might be, I am the right one, right? But it's not I am the right one from an egotistical perspective, right? It's just what I think the example of should be.
yeah. I mean, it makes me think Katherine Johnson and putting a
Yeah.
person on the moon.
Yes.
To get a person onto the moon was the ultimate exercise in accepting things as they were. Now we had to figure it out. We had to use the laws of physics to figure out what it took to do all these mathematical formulas to figure out how to make a certain thing happen. But there was no lack of acceptance of things as they were that was a part of that process, because you had to first figure out how all these forces were playing in, and then how you would work with that to launch the craft and get it back home with people in it, and that happens all the time, and I think what I've seen more commonly, and especially now that I'm looking for it, which is its own lesson, is people get confused about the concept of acceptance and surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And they equate it to giving up. It's not giving up, right? It's just understanding conditions as they actually are, rather than as you want them to be. From that position, you have many different options of how to put processes in place to move to a different set of conditions. You have a chance to affect the conditions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where, if you make that mistake and think that, I can't accept things as they are because of X, X, and X. This ain't right is the way you hear it a lot, right?
Yeah,
Like, this ain't right. I
That's
can't.
right. That's right.
It's not what that means, right? It doesn't mean that you can't be part of a solution that works something that's not right into something that's better.
That's right.
It's just that the beginning of that process is a full acknowledgement of how things actually are.
Right.
And, we see that play out in all kinds of things. The thing that we've talked about a lot in here is inclusive environments and racism and things like that, it all has to start with an acknowledgement of how things are.
That's right. That's right. I got a common cold, right? So I'm coughing and I'm sneezing and my eyes are watering. And I sit here and say, I just can't accept it. I have a cold. I'm not going to do anything about it because I just can't accept it. No, this is not what it is. And actually, when you can't accept it, there's a slight hint of denial there. But once I accept that I have a common cold and I'm coughing and I'm sneezing that could potentially impact someone else, then what I want to seek is a solution to end that. So how do I go about doing it? There are a multitude of ways, all kind of drugs out there on the marketplace that I can take to get rid of the common cold. I can change up my dietary habits. I can, add more onion and all these different things, right? As you just said, once I accept it, then there are a number of roads that will lead me to the eradication of the cold. But if I never accept it, then I'm just in a place of paralysis where, guess what? I'm going to continue to cough. I'm going to continue to sneeze. I'm probably going to infect some other people at the same time because I have this germ. But I have the germ because I haven't accepted that I have it so that I can do something about it.
Exactly. And since we're talking about health-related topics, I want to bring this into play right here. Book, Do You Speak Patient?
Yes, sir.
Right? And so I wrote this. It's just recently come out. All the proceeds, if you want to make a difference as a listener, all the proceeds from this book go to support a scholarship for people. It's called the HEAL Scholarship, HEAL, which is Health Equity for Aspiring Leaders. It's a college scholarship at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, my alma mater. And in this book, we really talk about the components of how to speak patient, what it takes to communicate effectively. We can use this same thing to work with organizations, whether they're healthcare organizations or others. So if you have an interest in understanding a little bit more about this and would like to make a difference by supporting a student who also wants to make a difference, you can find this on Amazon. Just go to Amazon. It's in Kindle version, hardback, or paperback. Amazon, and just search Do You Speak Patient, and you'll find it. If you have an organization that you'd like to have us do a little bit of work with, a little team building, which is a perfect setup for this book, we could also arrange directly with the publisher for a discounted rate and a customized edition. Hope you'll think about that and get a little more fluent in speaking patient.
Absolutely. And I know that in healthcare leaders, and it's applicable to across all industries, not just healthcare. And to kind of be in concert with that, I've recently published an ebook and you can find it on Amazon, and it is titled, How Do Leaders Keep the Music Playing? Integrity Through the Eyes of a Blues Man. And I utilized that title because a friend of mine told me about this construct called the 12-bar blues, in which if anyone across the world knows the 12-bar blues, they can actually sit in a band and play and sound as if they had been playing together for years. But what this book really speaks to is it shows that, to become a musician is an amazing thing, but it takes a lot of hard work. It also takes a lot of hard work to become a leader. So I'm showing the analogy between music, business, and leadership in how do leaders keep the music playing. This, along with Dr. Brown's book, is an excellent way to train leaders to understand different perspectives, different construct, and how to be able to lead better. So we'd be more than happy to come into your organization and help you find the right note and keep the music playing.
Absolutely. And to keep with our theme for today, who am I to think?
Yes.
Right? That's a real popular idea. And one of the things that we have learned over time is that the journeys that we talk about on this show taken, whether they are organizational development, whether they're individual development, leadership, group dynamics, one can only go on those once one is ready.
That's right.
And I think both of us have been in situations where we have, pulled our hair out trying to drag folks along that weren't ready.
That's right.
So now I'm trying to get over that tendency, right? It's a mental model that I've carried, and now I'm trying to release it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that first the work is all about me in terms of my self-awareness, my self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And when that goes well and others see it, they may be interested in taking that journey at that point in time. And up until then, it's mine to work on myself, to surround myself with other people who are on that same journey, and then just play it out as it goes.
That's right. It's so true. I think this is attributed to Confucius. It says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And until the student is ready, the teacher will not appear, but you need to be able to find a group of peers. That's what you're talking about. A group of peers who are on that journey, who are continuing. The whole self-development piece, right? I just love what Dr. Rao says. And he said, just bloom and the bees will find you, right? And that piece has been so instrumental to that the work, the personal work. And the evidence shows up because, of course, as you continue to develop who you are, then all of a sudden these opportunities begin to present themselves. And those are the bees who are coming in to pollinate and reward you for doing that self-work.
Yet another nature analogy, right?
Yes.
That, again, it's a bigger picture. There is there's basically the forces in the universe give you what you're really looking for, and you tend to become what you practice.
That's right.
Which is to me is the powerful reason to try to practice awareness. And that really starts with that question that I think we asked a while back is, who am I? Right? Instead of saying who am I to think, you could just shorten that question and say, who am I?
That's right.
That's a great start.
Right.
Right. And then you don't have to worry about a lot of the other things of, it has to be this way, or I'm just going to be in a struggle. One of the saddest things that I think I hear is, if you come across somebody in the morning, any morning, who says, my day is ruined, that's just so sad, right? Because now they have set themselves up to have a bad day. They've totally designed it. It's based on some conditions that they themselves want. It didn't have to be that way at all. It can change in an instant with that acceptance piece and with the opportunity to move forward, and just understand that our underlying tendency is to be happy, or at least to have a deep sense of satisfaction.
Right. When people ask me, so how was your day today? For me, my day is always great. And it's a choice to be great, right? Doesn't mean that I didn't have some challenges throughout the day that I had to resolve that may not have been pleasant. But regardless of that, my day was still a great day. And, people ask you, so what are you thankful for this morning? It's real simple. I opened my eyes. So a whole lot of people didn't open their eyes this morning. So we try to make things real complex when they're very, 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 very simple, right? Regardless of what happened, at the totality of the day, if I look at the pluses and the minuses, more than likely I have more pluses than minuses. Even though there may have been a minus that you may have caused some emotional reaction, and you get a little upset about some things, or you concerned or worry. At the end of the day, it's a great day.
Yeah, it really is simple, but it's hard to do.
Yeah,
and
that's
our whole set of experiences conspires against us sometimes if we allow it, and it's a deep, almost unanswerable question that you need to ask yourself over and over again. Is why is this set of circumstances bothering me? Or maybe even, who is this set of circumstances actually bothering? Because, like, now I'm aware of it. So the entity being bothered can't really be me, right? I'm the subject. The bother is the object. And as you start thinking through that, you're like, well, that's just this bias that I have that it ought to be that way, right? It actually doesn't have to be that way. What other ways could it be?
That's right.
And the next thing you know, that whole pattern of thought that you've had just passes like a cloud in the sky, and you're into another way of thinking, another way of potentially engaging. And it is such a fulfilling way to be.
Yeah, I think it goes back to a question I saw in a book. I want to say it was a book around creativity, and it says, "So, in how many ways can I look at this particular? How many ways can I look at this particular challenge to solve it or to make it better? In how many ways are the operative words. So that means that I'm going to write down so many options and alternatives about how to handle it. Then I'm going to make a decision on the optimal way to handle it. But many of us don't think in that way. So how many ways can I solve this problem? Right? And then what's the best way to solve this problem? That's a way that we need to begin to think.
Yeah, the great thinkers, take away the philosophers and the wise scientists, the Einsteins of the world, the Feynmans, profound creativity to get to the place that they establish some of the things that we now know to be true in terms of theory of relativity and quantum physics and all of these things that are actually, if you distill it down and you're looking at science, you realize that it also matches the philosophies that have been carried on. It takes you right to, a lot of Eastern patterns of thought, it takes you right to Christianity as well. The two are not different. They're different explanations in a sense, but they're not mutually exclusive.
I was listening to a piece the other day, and the guy says, oftentimes what we do in the Western society is we examine the content of something. We always want to deal with the content of a particular topic. He said, but we never continuously review the philosophy of it, the philosophy of business, the philosophy of math, the philosophy of health. If we change our philosophies around this, how does it change how we deliver this into Western society? Which I found that very, very interesting. They took me actually back to Dr. Tom when we had him on, and he was, of course, is a philosopher. And I just read something the other day where some other guys now leaving a university setting and getting more into philosophy and around the philosophy of business, which is pretty interesting.
It's needed. I mean, what happens is we tend to get into the hows of things, right? We tend to get into the KPIs of things because it's easier, right? But we neglect the hard work to the detriment of whatever we're trying to do ultimately, right? There, at the end of the day, there are no shortcuts. Working out, right? There's no shortcut to working out.
None.
Right? You have to put in the work, and over time you see the result, that dedication to a given process. And it's the same thing if we have an unexamined set of beliefs that are driving certain behavior, then it's just foolish to imagine that it's not going to take us to a place we didn't intend to be.
Right.
We just haven't examined really the underpinnings of it. That's so
right.
important.
The why of it all, right? The why of it all. Why are we doing things the way that we're doing things? Why should we do things differently? What would be the benefits of doing things differently, and what are the benefits of doing things the way we are? When we understand the why of it, and I think it was Simon Sinek said that, when we understand the why, it allows us to move forward, and that's from that whole philosophical perspective, right? Then we can add the content, to it, because now we understand the why, we understand the purpose. The purpose helps drive the content, and we get a great product, a great service out of it as a result of that.
It ties back into to the role of the leader.
Mm-hmm.
The role of the leader, in my opinion, is to never let that why get lost.
That's right.
It's kind of like the baton in a relay race. It doesn't matter what else you do.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't take care of that baton, you are not going to win that race.
Right.
You know, if that baton hits the track, you're going to get past. That's just the way it's going to be. It's going to be, and culture is that baton, and understanding your why is that baton. Sticking with that is the role of the leader. Right now, what we see is a drive toward some result. Maybe it's quarterly earnings, maybe it's any one of a number of different key performance indicators. And leaders get fixated on that because they feel like that's how they're judged. And many times that is how they're judged.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it's a recipe for underperformance.
Yes.
It's a recipe for underperformance because you lose so much from the team. Because actually attending to those features is the role of the team, not the role of the leader. We just see it get all sideways so often.
So short term, right? When you're in an organization, we are talking about the long term, because when we talk about sustainability, we're not talking about sustainability for a quarter. We're talking about sustainability 5, 10, 15 years, right? But yet I'm looking within this quarter around the results that we were able to drive, and I should be more concerned with what we're driving over 10, 15, years to show our sustainability. And leaders get caught up in that, and organizations and cultures get caught up, and they lose the why. They lose their why. And so you see them traveling off on different paths that are not common to who we knew that those organizations were and what their core actually was. And they lose the why, and they get away from the core, and then all of a sudden they have to have a transformation initiative, right? And you're trying to bring people back to the core of who the organization actually was, what made it successful, their values and their principles around why they exist, what they're there to actually do. And sometimes with that whole short-term thought process, outlook, because they're looking to satisfy the short term, it takes them away from the core.
Absolutely.
And so all of a sudden, now every quarter, they're trying to satisfy the short term, and they get further and further and further away from the core of who they are.
It's an ultimate leadership, who am I to think question,
That's right. That's right.
And it sounds something like, who am I to think as a leader that's multiple levels removed from what's really happening?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I to think I know how this should be done?
That's right.
And the really talented leaders don't fall for that trap very often.
No.
And you see them, whether it's in sports or whether it's in business, whether it's in education, the really talented leaders don't fall for that trap.
Nope.
And when they do, you see it plays out. And the end users can often tell that there's something wrong, but they can't tell what it is.
That's right.
The ground floor folks in an organization, for instance, a lot of times know what it is, but don't feel empowered to do anything about it, and often aren't empowered to do anything about it. And so you end up just with an organization that has a bunch of people who are doing the work because it's their job, instead of doing the work because it's their purpose. And to remain attached to purpose really requires a lot of times that the unit takes into account the individual perspectives, because every player has something to add. Every player has something to add. And if we fail to recognize that, then we're really setting things up for failure.
You know, I'll take a look at the NBA. A couple of years ago, Brooklyn Nets went out and got James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant. Man, they had a super team. And I look on the West Coast, and Golden State still has their core of Seth Curry, Thompson, Green, and other role players. If I fast forward to today, and if I look at the Brooklyn Nets, and none of those players are no longer there. They were trying to buy a championship, not understanding what it really means to have a culture of winning there. And I can look out on the West Coast, and I can see Golden State, and they're still in the playoffs this year with the same core because they developed a culture amongst their team. And even though we may see from time to time there's some disagreement amongst some of the players, they ultimately know how to handle it, who to handle it, because it's a part of the culture of how they exist as a team. So long-term impact that Golden State has had. They went from Oakland to a new city, and they built a brand new arena simply because of the winning culture that they were able to create over an extended period of time. They didn't do things the normal way. Even recently, when one of their players, Wiggins, left the team for 21 games because he said it was more important for him to take care of his father, who was sick, than it was to play with his teammates. And there, you didn't hear any argument. It's a part of the culture. They understood what was a priority to him, his father versus the team. He came right back in. He fit just like a piece of the puzzle, and he's been performing. And no one spoke out and said, well, why is this guy? He's not our teammate. He's not with us. He's not a warrior. What was really important was that he was handling a family matter because his father was ill. He came back to the team, and everybody welcomed him. But that's the difference in building a culture where everyone knows where everyone fits versus trying to purchase a culture because you got three key players who never fit together because there was no true culture there. That culture dictated itself. Now they are no longer together. This culture here was cultivated. That's a whole different animal.
Another great theme in Ted Lasso, by the way.
Yes.
Again, love that show, man. I tell you what, it can change some lives if you follow that. But,
yes.
You know, I guess it kind of brings us back full circle to who are we to think that we can ever do justice to this topic or that we could ever finish this discussion. Because it's really ongoing, and we want to thank our listeners for being with us today. We hope that you enjoy the material that we're bringing to you. You can find us at unlikelyintersection.com. All the episodes can also be found on YouTube at Unlikely Intersections or on Facebook at Unlikely Intersections. You can find me at docphilipbrown.com or also Doc Philip Brown on LinkedIn. And Terry?
You can find me at LinkedIn, Terry Jackson, PhD. You can find me on my website, jcgconsultinggroup.com. You can also find me on Facebook. Please go to our YouTube page, like, subscribe, and please leave a comment. Tell us what you think about the topics that we're discussing. And if you'd like to have us into your organization, you can reach us and find us, and we'd be more than happy. And if you have any topics that you'd like for us to discuss, please feel free to share.
We'll see you at the next intersection.